Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So it seems to me so much is happening, it's hard to get perspective on any of it, but it does feel like Thomas Massey's loss in the primary in Kentucky 2 weeks ago was like a kind of pivot point in American politics. What was your response to it?
Well, my response to it was, how dare we, preach democracy around the world and tell people that the people in China are oppressed when we obviously don't have democracy here. And so now it's the oligarchs, as I was telling you before. It's just proof that we don't live in a democracy. They did that Princeton study in 2015 about how the 90% of people, their wishes never are expressed in legislation, and it's only the top 10% of the wealthy people. And there's a direct correlation. If 50% of the wealthy people want something, 50% of the time it happens, And so, but the bottom doesn't matter. Your vote, that literally doesn't matter. And we're living in that. And so, I was telling
I think that there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. And so whether you are in favor of democracy or you are in favor of another alternative form of government, there is truth in the idea that the democracy that we live in is not the democratic sort of organizational structure that our founders had originally envisioned. And so it's really a constitutional republic, and that there's a difference between a pure democracy and a constitutional republic. But the people at the bottom of the income power hierarchy really don't have any voice. And in fact, I think that there's probably a gradient where he's saying that it's the power vests in the hands of the oligarchs or the billionaires. Some of the power certainly does. A great deal of power certainly does. But there's probably a gradient on a pyramidal kind of fall off as it goes down. And the farther you are from the top, the less power you have, less voice you have. I think that there's a lot of proof just in the way politicians appeal to wealthy people and they don't appeal to poor people or the working people or just the regular people. That kind of illustrates the point. You and I don't really have access to our representatives. They don't really represent us. They represent someone else, but they're not representing us and our viewpoints. They may do it in terms of a poll, the results of a poll, or the results of some sort of aggregated data about what the regular people in society are thinking. But I don't think that it's really a representative form of government in the way that our founders had envisioned.
Yeah, there's another way to look at this, though, Jeff. I think this may seem overly simplistic, but if you think about these oligarchs, these billionaires, there's a reason they wield influence. They are, in fact, billionaires. So they're in charge of commodities, or they build homes, or they are, in fact, they're yesteryear's influencers by virtue of the fact that they not only have great wealth, which most people are chasing in this country, nothing wrong with that, but they're also in high-profile positions, and they are ostensibly they're controlling the income of dozens or hundreds, or in many instances thousands of people. And so what they want and what they need and what they're hoping that the government does on their behalf, it may actually be good for the country and may actually be good. And so, it's sort of this cause celeb with these YouTubers where they're all talking about, all the oligarchs running everything and 10% of the population. Look, I don't mean to be crass, but if you're poor and you don't have, then you don't, by virtue of being poor, have a lot of social influence, because in fact, you're not casting a very wide net. You're living hand to mouth and you're trying to accomplish things. So politically, while it may not be fair, it seems pretty obvious that people that are in charge of big operations and big corporations would in fact be more influential just by virtue of the fact of reasons previously explained. So,
but that point though is exactly you're taking essentially the position of Bernie Sanders. You might be on the opposite side of it, but you're saying that, yeah, the things that the billionaires do, that the captains of industry do, are actually good. Bernie Sanders says, oh no, having these billionaires and the captains of industry, that's bad. There's too much power in these hands. The reason that they get to have that power oftentimes is because of their control over government. By having control over government, they have the ability to have the regulators,
influence,
the legislator create laws that are favorable to them, policies, laws, special benefits, privileges that benefit them and actually allow them to aggregate power further. So it's the interface between government and private industry that oftentimes that's the bad thing. That's the corrupting relationship. If you keep it separate, if you have small government that is not susceptible to corruption because it doesn't have much to give away, when you have a $5 trillion or $6 trillion budget like we do, and that's presumably giving away $6 trillion of American taxpayers' money to special interests, that's how that power aggregates and accretes. If you didn't have that kind of resource aggregation and then the reallocation of it, then you wouldn't have these problems. So it's the government itself. The politician has every incentive to buy the representative, to buy the senator, to buy the presidency, to buy whomever, and then they have access. With that access, they can control or shape the types of laws, the types of policies that benefit them, that allows them to further aggregate that power. So, separating that relationship benefits the people, benefits the voter. You would have more access to your representative, your House member, if you in fact had a one vote is as valuable as any other vote kind of environment. Right now, you don't. You have one vote coming from a person who's donating $500,000 to your campaign.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
A lot stronger voice than the vote that doesn't contribute.
Right. I think, there is also, again, another sort of common sense element to all this is that obviously if somebody is a billionaire and has risen to a certain level of, let's call it political influence, there may be a reason behind that. They may actually be smart. They may actually know how to make stuff work. They may actually have good ideas. And so,
that's true, but that doesn't belie the point.
I agree.
Look, let's take Elon Musk. He's a perfect example.
I was just, of course.
He is very smart. I think that's, sort of a widely recognized characteristic of him, and he's widely, regarded as a very intelligent person. Well, that intelligence apparently was used to create this. In fact, today SpaceX is going public. I think it's trading today on the stock market. The IPO is happening today for SpaceX. He's become a trillionaire. Now, his original wealth was generated from his. I think he was one of the founding members of PayPal. And so there was a group of people, Peter Thiel among others, who were part of the founding group of entrepreneurs that created PayPal. I think his personal take was a few $100 million, $100 million, maybe $200 million. And after that, almost everything he's done has involved the government providing subsidies and benefits to him. Tesla was not.
Wait, Jeff. Does that just not make him smart to leverage that?
I think I just said that he is smart.
Right. Okay. So I thought maybe that was a criticism.
That he's using.
I understand.
I think I just said that he's using the laws, shaping the creation of policy to benefit him. And so what he's done is Tesla was not profitable because it was selling cars. Tesla became profitable because it was selling Pagovian tax credits, carbon neutral tax credits. So Ford and GM and Chrysler, their fleets were not meeting whatever EPA regulations required them to meet. And so he was able to sell the offsetting tax credits to them. He made all this money over the first 10 years or so of Tesla's existence, not from selling cars, but from selling tax credits.
Well,
Moreover, $7,500 per year was given to anyone who bought a Tesla vehicle, an electric vehicle. So you got a tax credit. So these are expensive vehicles. He could charge a lot of money for them. People wanted to be part of, this sort of environmental movement. Maybe they just want an electric car, whatever. But they got a $7,500 tax credit from the federal government for doing that.
Paid for by taxpayers. Paid for by taxpayers, too.
Taxpayers by taxpayers. There's no federal government. You're correct. Taxpayers. And so he benefited once again. He would not have sold nearly as many cars as he did, but for the fact that tax credit exists. And how do we know that? Since the expiration of the tax credit, he's sold a lot fewer cars.
All right, wait. But this is analogous. Hold on to what your example of that Elon Musk did, which is an accurate portrayal of what you just mentioned, is akin to Donald Trump's tax releases being leaked and Donald Trump having paid close to or nothing in tax. And the resentment that people said, you're a billionaire and you don't pay anything in tax. Wait, does that make him dishonest? Does that make him a fool, or does that just make him shrewd?
I did not say anybody was dishonest.
I'm not saying you said
Donald Trump.
Wait. I'm not saying you said that. I'm saying, as an analogy, some people were put off, as it seems like some people are put off at Elon Musk's shrewdness and his ability to leverage his position in the auto industry.
You're missing the point entirely. It's not about his being shrewd or not being shrewd. If the federal government was not tied into,
I understand,
all the activities,
he just tapped into it.
SpaceX. Who's buying spacecraft? Who's spending money on rental of a cargo craft? The federal government. Nobody is buying, transportation to outer space privately.
So what's the solution? How should Musk played it?
My point is that you don't have such a close nexus between business and government. You don't allow that to happen. You don't allow government
to for regulation.
First access so much of our money, of taxpayers' money, and then to redistribute it to preferred, favored people. That's the point.
That's a mischaracterization. It's not because he's a preferred, favored person. It's the person that came up with the idea.
So you don't think that the Obama administration liked the environmental benefits of electric cars? You're suggesting that they were not pushing for higher, tighter EPA standards that almost forced the other legacy.
I'm
cars from having to buy tax credits.
You're getting into the logistics of the program. I'm
getting into the details. I'm getting into the facts.
But I'm talking about stepping back. This is about political influence and about billionaires. Yeah. The supposed characterization that billionaires wield all this public influence and this political influence. And I'm simply saying that by virtue of what Elon Musk did with the electric tax credits, which I didn't love at all. But it just
point, Scott, you're missing the point. There shouldn't be electric tax credits. There shouldn't be.
Okay, but that's not Elon Musk's fault, and he was very smart to capitalize on it.
I'm not blaming Elon Musk.
Okay, so my point originally was that these billionaires that have this political influence, Elon Musk has put himself in that position.
A system where you have a great deal of taxpayer funding available for the government to choose to allocate how they wish. And the government, through its regulatory framework, through its policy making, through its legislation, creates laws, regulations, incentives, preferences that benefit certain people. And that is just choice. Choice does that. That's the nature of choice. When a trade-off, when you choose to X, that means you've excluded Y.
Well,
choosing X means you've excluded Y.
But understand that again, I'm not for the electric car tax. I'm not for.
In order to allocate to the people that it chooses to allocate to, that's a good start. Small government prevents that from happening.
All I'm saying is Dore's characterization that these billionaires wield all this political influence, The electric car tax credit was in fact for anybody. That program could have been utilized by anybody. It
How
happens
many
that
electric car manufacturers
just
were
one
there?
person has had the audacity and the ability and the talent to start a car company. It's Elon Musk. Now, I'm not. Again, I want to be clear. I think that program was grossly flawed. I agree with you that it shouldn't have been there. It shouldn't have been hung on the backs of the American.
If you, in the absence of,
But
these
wait, Jeff. The original point here was, why did these oligarchs and these billionaires? This country's run by 10% of the population. These or whatever. This small percentage of these people that hold all this political influence. And I would only say to you that those people there's a reason. We don't have somebody who doesn't have great opportunities and creating great opportunities and great technologies in those positions. Those people are in the position for that reason. And so it's just smart that Elon Musk has done what he has leveraged what he's leveraged. I don't like it any more than you do.
In the absence of the tax credit, and we get to see in the absence of, I think Trump's EPA, Lee Zeldin, has altered the EPA requirements that are placed on emissions and vehicle fuel economy. And so in the change, those alterations that have taken place, we see now that the electric vehicle market has collapsed. When there was a regulatory market that sort of forced or incentivized certain consumer behavior, they got what they wanted. And in the absence of those regulations, now we're seeing what consumers are really voluntarily choosing to do. And it's not to buy electric cars. It's not to have the inability to buy a diesel vehicle, or the inability to buy
once you remove the government supplementing the cost of the electric cars, they no longer make. Of course, that all makes sense. The original comments and the original commentary is about oligarchs and social influence and billionaires running the country supposedly. And my only point was, and of course Elon Musk is probably the top profile of such person. Is that I think Elon Musk was right place, right time, and knew how to turn that program into what he turned it into. We may not like it, and we may not be for it, but he did it, and there's a reason that when somebody of political significance is interested in what public policy should be, you ask somebody like Elon Musk, because he employs tens of thousands of people, invests tens of millions of dollars back into the economy. Maybe most of it is taxpayer money. That's not good. But these comments about that this country's only run, Bernie Sanders, there's no bigger oligarch in our country than Bernie Sanders, who's obviously very wealthy and is looking for both political and financial wealth and power. And so it's ironic that, he's calling for all these things for the common man when he, of course, is an elitist, a liberal elitist.
But what Bernie Sanders fails to recognize, and Jimmy Dore, and then you on the other side, though, Scott, is that it's the interface between government and business that allows this stuff to happen. The things that people, that the regular citizen is so offended by, is so powerless to change, to alter the feeling of powerlessness. It comes from the combining of the business.
I understand.
From the government, and I separate them, which is how our original founding fathers imagined it. The free market exists here, government exists here, but when they're connected, then you get a power structure that is very skewed away from the citizen. And
to your point, the electric tax credits are an excellent example of what you're talking about with this business and government being too interchangeable. I agree with you. It's flawed. I'm just saying that, once again, this characterization of these oligarchs controlling political influence and public policy, there is a justifiable explanation for that, and that's what I'm offering.
Yes, the explanation. I mean, honestly, the explanation is simple. They have an incentive to get at our tax dollars. Ultimately, that's the incentive.
Sure, there's a lot of money at play, and they're all about the money.
When you go into a space business, there's a single buyer of that, right? That single buyer of the space goods and services, that's called a monopsony, a single buyer of something. The government's a monopsony buyer of those services, and Elon Musk is now selling those services to the government.
But that's simply nobody else in the free market has been able to replicate what Musk has brought to.
And actually, some of the things he's done, the science behind his rocket ships, the reusability of the rocket ships, it's brilliant. He's done it for a relatively low cost, and he's done it in a time.
The government paid $100 million. He paid $1 million.
Yeah,
basically for a rocket.
It's a time scale too. He did it in a few years. He got 10 years or something, got this rocket program going, and it took our government 50 years to do something not even as good. But the point is it's not his intelligence, which is, I think without question, it's that the government should not be allocating our tax dollars the way they do. They have too much of our tax dollars. When you're taxing the population, let's just say that the government is roughly 30% of our GDP. That means that they own 30% of us, of our work product. That means only 70% of what we generate is available for us. The rest of it's for the government to allocate. Well, I think we should allocate more like 95% of the value that we generate, the product that we generate, right? And let the government then live on 5%. And that would incentivize businesses actually to go do something productive with their resources rather than rent seek the federal government.
Sure.
Okay, let's get back to Jimmy Dore.
Or in China, the government sits above capital.
Yes.
And so the economy works for the people. But in the United States, capital is above the government. And so the economy doesn't work for the people. It works for a handful of international globalist billionaires, which is why we have homelessness everywhere. We have the biggest prison population in the world.
So this idea of capital in the United States being above government, right? I think he's got that wrong. And then he goes on to say that in China, government is above capital, and I think he's got that right in China, and that's because they have a command economy. The government controls the capital layer, the economic means of production. In the United States, the capital is not above government, it's coextensive with government. That's why we experience, this is what I was just saying a few moments ago, this is why we experience the sort of strange relationship that we have with government and business. It's because they're kind of combined. I don't know that capital is actually above. I think it's more intertwined with government.
I think you want to send a message to Jimmy and say, Jimmy, careful, your true liberal soul is bleeding through mistakenly. He feels like his summation is that basically China's doing it better than we are, which is absolutely beyond crazy.
The warmth of collectivism.
And, we still go bankrupt just to get educated. You get bankrupt when you get sick. And like I say is that we live in a surveillance state. And so we're like China, except we have more street crime and slower trains.
And we get...
Yeah, by the way, Jeff, a lot of people get educated without going bankrupt. I don't know how many actually go bankrupt from going to debt. And a lot of people get sick and get well without going bankrupt. Inflammatory language from the left. This is typical, sort of mischaracterization and overblown and just kind of...
Yeah, so. I mean, but if Jimmy Dore gets some things wrong, I mean, that doesn't mean everything he says then is going to be wrong. Right?
I do watch him, and I do think he's good at times, but I just think it's kind of obvious where he's coming from.
In the most self-righteous way by the worst people. It's a hard jump for your average right-winger, me, for example, to accept the fact that corporations are even more malicious than government.
Way more.
I think I'm coming around to that just because the evidence is overwhelming, but I do think there's like a training that takes place where you...
Now, I don't know what evidence he's saying that's overwhelming. He's not cited any evidence.
Just have someone point to Soviet Poland and you're like, that's the option to what we have. And you're like, I don't want that. I don't like potatoes. You know what I mean? Bad architecture, grim weather. But I kind of believe that.
Yeah, hey Jeff, really fast. Back in my youth, I was in Poland when it was communist. Was in the country for several days and looking around. They were delivering mail by a horse-drawn carriage, a horse-drawn flatbed, you know, pull behind for this. And I tried to take a picture of it, and the guy said no, he wouldn't let me take a picture of this because I was stunned as the mailman coming down the road with a horse drawn. Not in Amish country, Pennsylvania. This was in, and so my point is that
is the issue that the horses had certain privacy rights?
Probably is a PETA thing, and there was some. They were expecting a photo credit. The truth is I saw socialism firsthand, lived it for a few days, and it was an abysmal failure, as you would assume. It wasn't working at all. What you saw, moment to moment, going on in Krakow was heartbreaking. It was terrible, and remembering just how pronounced the disparity was between there and here.
No. All right.
You believe that that's the option?
That was the option.
Oh.
So either you have like Google runs everything, and you know they do Technicolor, and it's like
Google
free,
does run
and it's
everything.
great, or the state runs everything, and it's Soviet Poland. And
Yeah.
so like I do think the average right winger, or again, I'll speak for myself. It's like hard to accept that you want to live in a system where billionaires don't control everything. Like that's not good.
That's not good. That's look around.
You're right.
This is the system we're living in, and you know, corporations. There's no long-term planning, right? At least in China, they have long-term planning, right?
Yes.
Which is why they get to have flying cars.
Jimmy Dore, once again, holding up the attributes of China.
That make their own waterfalls and own rainbows, stuff like that. It's just amazing. And in here, because they don't, in the corporations only care about quarterly profits. So they don't care if the whole company crashes as long as they can show a profit in the quarter.
I think that's right.
And that's the problem. There's no long-term planning in America. And that's why, and, you know, I also have a firm belief that,
You know, I disagree with the long-term planning argument. There's all kinds of long-term planning going on. It's just that you can't anticipate new technologies, and so if you install a subway system, and then you come to realize that that's actually not the most efficient way of transporting people to the specific places where they want to go. Well, then now you've had all that investment in that, right? Or you build apartment blocks for people to live in.
Massive infrastructure investments, right?
Massive apartment blocks for people to live in, their little cubicles, and people really want to have a little patch of grass they could sink their toes into, and their dog could run around.
Reasonable,
right? So you have to let people kind of express how they want to do things. What's the consumer's preference for how they want to live, how they want to transport. But when you don't let people have a car and you keep everybody on a train, well, then that's what they're going to do and use, and it's going to seem like it works. But as soon as you don't have that, or new technology comes along, well, then it's just a kind of a wasted system, right? Because you see that people really want, almost every time people in the United States have sort of called for or championed having new subway systems, if they're not subsidized heavily by taxpayers, they fail. They don't work. You couldn't put a private system together. Just people prefer to use their vehicles to get around. Now, in Manhattan, it seems to work, but that's because they're taxing people to get on the island. You have a congestion surcharge now, another $9-10 to get for a passenger car to get into Manhattan. That's in addition to the $20 worth of tolls on the way, the toll roads to get there.
They're completely government run amok.
$70 to park for the day.
What small business can afford to pay to go in and out of Manhattan at $9 for a car and $21 for a truck? They're laying that on the backs of exactly the people that can't afford that, right? The people who are working.
And then you create a situation where then you're sort of forced to use a subway or a train, but then the government workers who are running the subways and the trains will go on strike until they can get extract as much money as they can for wages out of the taxpayer. So it's a system that just sort of concentrates too much power in too few hands, where a real, genuine free market system, and there are issues that arise sometimes, right? The tragedy of the commons is a problem where resources are inefficiently used because of all the individual incentives to use the collective resource. But that's why it's better if it's a private resource to begin with. But
California, they spent $24 billion to try to fix homelessness, and none of it just got worse. And, I think you've talked about this, that it seems planned, because it probably is, that they want us to live in this kind of hellscape. So we beg for authoritarian solutions to these problems. And
that's right.
$24 billion. You know this intimately because you lived in California, Scott. But $24 billion to solve the homelessness problem. Again, the homeless problem arises because of the spending by government on homelessness. You can look back. The data is very clear on this. In the United States, prior to Johnson's war on poverty, all the legislation, the anti-poverty legislation that started being enacted in the early to mid-'60s, prior to that, if you looked at the rates of poverty in the United States, they were plummeting, particularly among African Americans. It was just plummeting. After these policies that get
entitlements,
these anti-poverty policies get enacted in the mid-'60s, it flatlines like this. So the natural trajectory would have been to continue down at a steep rate. Now, it would have at some point it would have bottomed out. There's no doubt about that, and then maybe even risen a little bit. But this is coming off of a relatively high rate, dropping like crazy, and then as soon as these policies get enacted, it flatlines. It stops falling. So what we see is those policies, anti-war campaign initiatives, they actually stopped the progress for having people not be in poverty in the United States. I don't know. When he's talking about the government spending $24 billion in California and not getting much results, that's the problem with the government spending a lot of money on these social problems. These things would sort themselves out. People would go to work if they needed a job.
Like oftentimes the government's attempt at solving the problem actually perpetuated the problem. It's ironic that the supposed solutions to address things in so many instances with government programs end up actually making the problem worse.
That's what they're doing, right? So, it all started with 9/11. They had the Patriot Act already written before 9/11, right? So they and as Edward Snowden revealed, that they're collecting every text, every phone call, every email you make anyway. So we live in a, and then it's just getting worse. Flock cameras. It's like what you said to Kevin O'Leary. It's like they're there to help us fight crime. Really? Crime rates going down? Are they? No. So this is what happens. And Thomas Massey, I mean, a guy who won almost unanimously, and then his positions didn't change, but then all of a sudden he loses, and loses big, right? He lost by 10 points. So and it was all propaganda and lies, and who knows if they also fiddled with the vote? Why would you put that past them? Why? Of course they would. The people who slaughter people for profit, which is what been the last 25 years since 9/11, just slaughtering people for profit. They wouldn't rig an election? Right? Of course they would.
Of course.
Yeah. And
if it's important enough to murder people, it's important enough to take over electronic voting machines, of course. And by the way, that's the one thing you're not allowed to say.
You're not. Well,
so that's always a tip.
Before 2020, the Democrats used to scream about.
I remember.
And I have video after video I show on my show about the Democrats saying how easily hacked these electronic voting machines are. And then there was a day you can't say it anymore, right? Just like you used to be able to criticize Big Pharma, and then there was a day you can't do it anymore, right? Remember? And so, of course, those people would rig elections. I mean, the people who did Building 7 wouldn't rig an election.
No, it's just people risk their lives to rob liquor stores. So, right, a lot's at stake. But I kind of wonder, like, why do we have electronic voting machines that are not faster? You don't get to vote faster,
Right? Takes
right?
forever.
It takes forever. So what is the purpose? What's the utility? Why do we still have them? Why not just, I don't know, give a thumbprint like they do in
Yes.
civilized countries like Malawi?
It's easier to control. Why? I mean, that's the obvious, right? The easiest answer, right?
You know, there's some truth with the technological simplicity of going in, to a voting station, casting a ballot. You have red ballots for one candidate, blue ballots for another, and so forth. Getting your finger dyed, permanent, semi-permanent dye, lasts for 3 days. And then you go on about your business. They count up the ballots and then move on.
Well, we're more than a week past the California election, and they're still counting votes. What happened to the electronic? What?
Exactly.
Wait a minute. Just a second. Something's not adding up here, and it's the votes.
Ultimately, it doesn't really matter what the technology is. There's a common saying that I think it's attributed to Stalin that it doesn't matter what your vote is, it's who counts your votes,
Sure.
or something along that. I'm paraphrasing it,
Right.
but that's true whether it's an electronic voting system, a mechanical voting system like the punch cards and the loose chads or the hanging chads, or a written ballot where you write your candidate and you sign it, or one that you check mark off, or whatever. It ultimately, the technology of your casting your vote doesn't really matter in the end. It is the counting. Is the counting correct? Is the counting verifiable?
Yeah.
Is it reproducible? Mm-hmm. That's really what ultimately matters.
Well, that's the other thing that's too, is that you always cast a cloud of suspicion when people don't want to open the books.
All right, we're going to jump ahead.
So
a little bit.
what I said after Thomas Massey was that, the last time that the establishment was this unresponsive to its citizens, George Washington picked up a gun and started shooting people.
Well, that's right.
And I'm not advocating violence, obviously. And but what we need to do, and the truckers in Canada during COVID laid a template for this, which is why they overreacted to them so hard, because they knew they didn't want them, just like when Joe Biden crushed that railroad strike. They had to do that because that would have showed everybody the power.
This is some shrewd observations right here. This is good stuff right here. Dore's right on this stuff. The truckers thing and the railroad strike thing.
That was a big deal in Canada. And they were in my estimation, they were abused. The truckers had their checking accounts and their bank accounts seized. They were sort of put on blacklists.
Jeff, the addendum to that whole thing was that I won't mention by names, but one of the crowdfunding source sites had a website set up to donate to them, and they shut that down because they did not want to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're right. You're right. It was like a GoFundMe.
I wasn't going to say that, but yes.
Yes, but whatever it was, but they raised a lot of money, and that was shut down, right?
Yeah, they didn't want anything to do with helping these patriots that were trying to.
And if you think to other examples, they're analogous. The French farmers, European farmers, sometimes in England, sometimes in France, they go on strike and they will clog the roads up, or they refuse to sell the wheat or whatever, and it causes social disruption. And they
usually garner a fair amount of attention, by the way.
They do. It becomes international, and they usually then get some response. In Canada, those truckers got no response. They had grievances that they brought to the table, and they were ignored, and they were treated violently by police officers, by the state, by Trudeau's state.
Yep.
Yeah. Because the railroad is the backbone of capitalism, and if you shut that down, it shuts down, and the oligarchs get hurt, right? And so they had to stop that. They made it illegal for them to go on strike. And so what I said is that after Thomas Massey is that we need to have. What if all the railroad workers just didn't show up for work for a week or so? What if the port workers didn't show up? What if all the truck drivers didn't show up, and then they went and they occupied Wall Street, which is why Occupy Wall Street scared the hell out of them.
Yes.
And because that was the left and the right. So you had the Tea Party upset about the banks. You had the left progressives upset about the banks. They had a common interest, because that's the thing they don't want you to know, is that we actually have a common interest. They want you to keep turning against your neighbor like your neighbor's the problem.
Exactly.
And your neighbor's not your problem, because your neighbor is suffering under the same oligarchy that you're suffering under.
Exactly.
And they don't want
There is some truth to that too. So some political theorists have argued that the majority of the issues that separate, say, Democrats from Republicans are really social issues that are not necessarily very meaningful, but they cause a great deal of emotional reaction or a passion about. And so my own personal theory is that we really have this sort of uniparty, and it splits the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, and the uniparty kind of sits in between, and it's the one that would control what he was calling all the economic activity, and you see the policy kind of works that way, and that really the difference between the two parties then comes down to a list of 10, 12 social issues that just fire people up and get them motivated to vote, rather than, to actually have any impact on the quality of their lives.
I think the bigger point of what you're saying, Jeff, is that, in fact, unfortunately, the left needs the divisiveness that they so stoke the flames of. They need the vitriol against Donald Trump, with which to continue to motivate their base. It sounds sort of counterintuitive that you would have this sort of the official stance of this, they're just anti anything that's to do with Trump, right? That's what the left does, is they just...
Yes, but it's equally true, though, that say Republicans have certain, sort of social issues that they are very passionate about, and that they vote in that block way.
But I would say Exhibit A to that might be, if you go back to, Barack Obama, his administration for his 8 years, there was a lot less divisiveness. I think there was just as much passion and disdain for Obama's policies at that time and place, but there was considerably more left-right working together, even in that very divisive time, than there is today. So,
well, you do have the third influence, which is the mainstream media was very much with Obama's administration, progressive generally.
This is what I think Obama's administration is, when the mainstream media sort of flipped. It's when it really sort of lost its...
I don't know about flipped. The mainstream media has always been kind of, I think, left-leaning, progressive-leaning.
I'm saying it's when they threw caution to the wind about taking public stances on political issues. I think it's where they really started to back a political cause. Mainstream media really came, the roosters came home to roost during Obama's time.
On these social issues, though, it's hard if you are, a partisan in one camp on the social issue. It's hard to understand the other side's position, and so that's why they're so effective at these positions. These issues are so effective at driving voters to the polls. If it were purely economic policy or political policy, people would largely not be voting. It's the emotional draw that both sides are able to sort of create from these wedge issues that used to be called wedge issues. There's a whole host of wedge issues. I call them just social issues generally. That gets people to vote, and that's why I think they're used with such effect.
Well, I would argue, though, cautiously argue that I think those on the right would suspend at least partially suspend some of their disdain for the left on issues that matter for the whole of the country, meaning some of the recent funding bills and some of the things that have been, they really, it feels like the left and the right were dug in on their positions really solely based on just being from the left and just being from the right, with the issue being damned. You know, the DHS funding for security, we got the World Cup here, and those kinds of issues that seem better for the whole country, for both sides, to have the DHS funded, and they of course wanted to politicize it and make it about ICE and the whole thing. My point is that, and this may seem biased, I don't think it is, that I think the bigger divide is to do with just being anti-Trump. It's all to do, and really, Jimmy Dore says it, and I've heard it before, and I thought of it myself, is that the left needs Donald Trump more than they need anything else, because that's how they raise funds, that's how they push their political agenda, is to be anti-Trump. That gives them a big, strong platform point to.
Well, yes, but there's also this movement now in sort of the conservative, generally conservative world. I don't know that it's purely conservative, but you know, this America First movement, they're separating from Trump, and they don't think that Trump is actually an advocate for America First as much as he, you know, ostensibly insisted that he was with MAGA. Like, that was his platform. I'm MAGA. And he creates the MAGA background. But a lot of MAGA people are sort of pulling away from MAGA, and they're going into sort of an America First sort of political. And by the way, that term, America First, is ancient. It was used during World War I in the teens. You know, in fact, Bill Buckley Jr., when he was a young man, first getting into politics, there was this concept of America First. So it's been around for a long time, and I think it's being revived, the America First movement, but it is not necessarily a Donald Trump.
Well, I would. The one thing I would say is I would caution us all that the media is busy painting a picture about the political climate in this country, that they're very interested in espousing this messaging, continued messaging, that Donald Trump's base is unsettled and that they're this and that they're that.
Well, and the mainstream media, though, Scott, the mainstream media has lost. Very few people are actually. If you're younger than 60 years old, you don't really get your news from the mainstream media anymore.
But look, I think you're right.
Who are watching Fox and Newsmax.
I think you're right. But if you look at the passion, look at the voting rates of people in their 20s and 30s compared to people in their 60s, and realize that the mainstream media still wields a certain amount a certain amount of influence, based on the fact that the demographic that they're speaking of, that really is really the only ones that subscribe to the old school mainstream media, are still in fact a very viable, very active group, and a large part of the demographic. Of course, obviously, we all know the median age in the country is skewing older and older from the baby boomers. As they get older, people are having less kids. So that demographic is actually where some of the gold is politically. And the mainstream media spends all day, every day, demonizing Donald Trump and painting this picture of that the Republican Party is unsettled. Meanwhile, you look at these elections and you look at what's going on, and California being the first one that jumps to mind, with this governor's race and Hilton showing pretty much stunning people. He's still got a long way to go. I don't think he's going to win. I think he could win, and I think he should win, but I don't think he's going to win, and there's reasons for that outside of this podcast. But the point is that the commentary in the mainstream media about what's going on politically on the right doesn't really match what's actually going on the right, and it's hard for us all to get a little sip of that, because it's all painted in broad strokes, it's all done very quickly, and it's also this avalanche of misinformation which they're now unabashedly subscribing to. I would say one thing really fast, just about President Trump's policies. How fast we forget. Let's remember what this country went through with Barack Obama, and let's remember what this country went through with Joe Biden. It's very easy for all these YouTubers, these provocative observations about Trump and about I used to be a Trump supporter.
This
I'm
is
not anymore.
This is Tucker Carlson. I mean, this is pretty mainstream stuff. It's Tucker Carlson. It's Megyn Kelly. It's your favorite
Right.
Candace Owen.
Listen, I don't think, I would say observationally, I think Tucker Carlson is still brilliant. I think he's one of the best at what he does. Having said that, it's a different place for him. He's on social media. Maybe he's better than he was in the long run than he was on his old network. But my point is that, even there is a certain motivation for people, the Megyn Kellys and the Candace Owenses, to be making these proclamations and all this about, look out, there's Donald Trump's, Donald Trump's base, Republican Party base is unsettled, and they're questioning Trump. The reality of it is, look at the results, look at the elections. I think people have had enough. And some of these blue and purple states and cities, and it's going down to local elections, city elections, regional elections, and national elections.
Is that the purple hair state?
Yes. Didn't we have an episode with somebody with purple hair? Anyway, short-lived. Anyway, it's not our greatest hits.
And she's from Connecticut.
Yes. Well, there's a predisposition to purple hair in Connecticut, I think. Anyway, so I guess my point was, all of that was just that the mainstream media, I think Jimmy Dore's got some good observations and he's sharp, but I think he is a liberal at heart, and I think he's frustrated with where he is in life. I think he thought he was going to be somewhere else politically and as a media personality, and I think he's taking shots at.
He's got a lot more subscribers than we do. Please, if you're watching this, have a little bit of generosity. Hit the subscribe button if you like this content at all. Even if you don't like it, hit the subscribe button, please.
And that we can work on the other stuff later, but we got to come together to stop these WEF globalist billionaires that actually run and dictate our lives. And so that's what I'm saying, is that we need to have, all the grocery store workers, all the UPS, all the Amazon. If a couple of them did it together, it would show the power of the workers that we actually can take. And you have to have a protest. When you have a protest, you have to have a demand. So that's why those No Kings marches, right, or protests, those are psyops. And how do you know they're a psyop? Because there's no demand.
It's such a good
wait, Jeff. So sorry. The point is, he didn't use the right. What he means is those people are hired. So many of those people. This is a huge. I mean, obviously, if you have 100,000 people, you're going to get the purple hairs.
These are professional paid protesters.
Yeah, but when you have a march, of course, the media overstates it. The mainstream, it was 300,000 people. It's like 100,000 people, 150,000 people. But the point of it all is he's right.
Trump does that too.
What's that?
Trump does that too.
Well, Trump exaggerates. But that's just so short of a political miscalculation.
His point is a good one, right? When you are the Canadian truck driver movement or member of that movement, you have a very specific grievance that you want to make sure that the world knows about. If you're the farmer from France, you are letting the world know that there is some issue, and it's everybody understands that. You wear that on your sleeve. With the No Kings movement and other protests, you don't know what they're calling for. You don't know.
Wait, Jeff. To your point about the truckers, we all understand how much validity their position had based on the response, the absolute take them out at the knees, take no prisoners response to the truckers. To me, validated their position, because if it was the No Kings,
how effective they were.
Yeah. Not only how effective, but what their message was people started to go, wait a minute, they're right. That makes sense. And they're like, well, we can't have this. We got to shut this down and shut it down hard. They thought at first it was 5 trucks and then 10 trucks and then 110 trucks and then a few hundred trucks. And all of a sudden they had a problem, and it was picking up momentum. And it wasn't like the No Kings tour. Hey, everybody, show up at 9 o'clock with your signs. And the protest ends around 3, and everybody go back to your cars and go home. No, that wasn't what the truckers did. The truckers parked their trucks and said, we're not moving. and we'll sit here for a month or longer. Those are two very different, right? Those are two very different sets of criteria from which one is protesting and the messaging behind it.
100%. I agree. Well, thanks again for joining us. If you like this content, please let us know in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe.